Welcome back to Hersheypark in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Now, I've done a few Hersheypark videos. This one's particularly special because it's a completely different park when you enter. If you look back at some of my previous videos, you'll find a massive change this year. And there have even been more changes since this whole area was redone. This is the new entrance to the park. Notice it says Chocolate Town there. There's a lot of wonderful pavement. Embedded into the ground is a sort of history of the park with little medallions that you can look at. Really nice architecture. It's a far cry from the old sort of Pennsylvania Dutch look with the Tudor buildings that the park used to have. So there in front of us are the entrance gates, so let's dissolve on through, and here's what you now see when you enter the park. It's pretty spectacular. And in front of us is Candemonium, which is a pretty fantastic B&M hypercoaster. The park manages to cram these huge rides into relatively small spaces, and this is a wonderful showpiece as you come in. Over on the right is guest services, and over on the left is the main entrance to the park. There's the new location for the park's old PTC carousel with its working band organ, and then to that left is the Hersheypark Supply Company, which has Milton's, a really nice ice cream shop, along with the Chocolatier, which is an upscale restaurant on the upper level, and it's a gorgeous building, really, really nicely designed. So we're going to walk through here, and I'm going to take a route that I'd wanted to take in the last video but couldn't because it was blocked off, to take you around a different scenic path to get to the Hollow section of the park. And here, of course, is the obligatory Starbucks on the right, and lots of other shops all along here. Of course, at Hershey, there is chocolate. Lots and lots of chocolate. The buildings look like chocolate. Everything smells like chocolate. So if you like chocolate, of course, this is your park. Now, if we take a right at this point, that brings you to the entrance of Candemonium. And it's a really nice entrance. It's sort of like this old Romanesque cave that you go into, nice and cool on a hot day. And there's the lift hill of Candemonium. Great ride, lots and lots of airtime. Relatively short, but fun. So we'll keep moving on down this section of the park. And the building over on the left, which used to be a skyride station many, many years ago, also used to have a falafel concession that was really good, but that's gone, and it looks like it's just a sort of stage area now. So we're going to take a right here. It's not something that you would really notice walking through, but this is a really nice scenic walkway to get you to the Hollow section of the park. While not technically a theme park, except themed around chocolate, Hershey's has a set of different sort of lands. And, of course, the first one we saw at the entrance was Chocolate Town. And if we were to continue left from there, you'd go on to Founder's Way, which has a statue of Milton Hershey. The area we're going to, as I said, is called the Hollow. And there's also the Pioneer Frontier and Kissing Tower Hill. There's Zoo America, which we'll see a little later, and also the Boardwalk area and Midway America. So those are roughly the sections the park is divided into, but you really don't notice like you would at Disneyland, where you go from Tomorrowland to Frontierland or anything like that. It's much more subtle a change. Just something to sort of help you locate different things on the map. Surrounding us is Sky Rush, which is a really intense coaster. Like I said about Candemonium, they crammed a lot of coaster into a very small area. So the coaster is about 200 feet high, and they didn't have a lot of land to work with, so everything is twisting and turning, and at the same time you've got lots of severe airtime, like ejector air where if you didn't have the restraint on you, you would probably end up in the pond there to the right. It's really, really intense. Still a lot of fun. It's not punishing, but pretty extreme. Hersheypark opened in 1906 as a place Milton Hershey created for his employees to just come and relax on their days off. And it's developed into the largest amusement park in Pennsylvania. The ride that you see in front of you now, the wooden coaster, is Comet, which is one of my favorite rides in the park, developed by my favorite designer, Herb Schmeck of Philadelphia Toboggan Company in 1946. And here comes Sky Rush, the Intamin hypercoaster. Much of the park is located around Spring Creek, which has benefits and some drawbacks. The benefits are it's really pretty, and it's a wonderful sort of natural accent to the park, but it occasionally floods. And Hershey did go through a couple of hurricanes that did damage to the park, but they've bounced back. The hanging track that you see there over on the right is part of Great Bear. The lift hill you can also see in the distance there. Great Bear is a pretty intense B&M suspended coaster, and you can see the track we're walking under it now. Over on the left is the entrance to Sky Rush. If we were to go further down on the left there, that would be the entrance to the Comet, and then that has a path taking you up out of the hollow and over to the entrance to the Sky Ride, which is a really nice short travel across Great Bear and Super Duper Looper in that area of the park. And Super Duper Looper was one of the first looping coasters installed in the US. There goes Great Bear. The entrance to Super Duper Looper is over on the right. It's an Anton Schwarzkopf ride, and that white loop that you see is the only loop on the ride. The rest of the ride sort of meanders up and down hills in a picturesque way through a forested area of the park. It's a very nice ride and a good starter ride for younger people. And there you can see it going up the lift hill on the right. There goes Great Bear again. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow this path up toward the Kissing Tower Hill. And there are a lot of hills in this park, so especially in the heat of summer, it's a pretty intense workout walking from one end to the other. There goes Super Duper Looper. Now, the interesting thing is they have several transportation methods. They have a wonderful monorail ride that's pretty long. They also have a train ride, but they're all basically a closed circuit loop. They don't stop anywhere else in the park, which I think is a shame. I think that would be a good way to get around. Even the Sky Ride, it goes from one end of the park to the other and back, and you can't get off anywhere. You see, there's the end of the Sky Ride there. I think it would be nice if they had more transportation to get you from one end of the park to the other, because it is a pretty hefty walk. The building in front of us, the big white building, is the Overlook Restaurant, which is one of the biggest restaurants in the park, and they do serve veggie burgers. And on the right you saw the loading area for Coal Cracker, which is a wonderful flume ride, one of the last speed racers in the United States. The Speed Racer is an interesting flume that has a sort of little bunny hop at the end when it comes down the big hill, and the boats are shaped sort of like canoes. So you get an interesting little hop at the end. Way in front of us is Tower Fries, which, as you might suspect, serves French fries. And up there, the paths split. You can go straight, you can go left, you can go right. But we're going to stay heading toward the right around by Great Bear and the Kissing Tower, so you can see all that area. On the left, you can see the Triple Tower, and that is basically just 3 S&S power shot towers one next to another, and one's a little short one, one's a little bigger, and the other one's really tall. That replaced their old Condor ride that they used to have in that spot. Over here on the right is the entrance to the Great Bear. Notice that there is lots of shade in this park, and that is really welcome on a hot day. What we're coming up to now is the Twin Turnpike. You can see Speedway, which has the little sport cars, and then on the left is the antique cars, and they both run parallel to each other. And there's a nice little fountain, and that is the entrance to the Kissing Tower, which is an observation tower that has a unique observation room surrounded by windows that look like Hershey Kisses. And it goes up about 300 feet and gives you panoramic views of the whole Hershey, Pennsylvania area, as well as, of course, the park. Then we're going to take a left here, and we're going to head toward the entrance of Zoo America. It's a surprisingly large zoo with a wide variety of animals. Popular bear exhibit, and when we were there, the bears were sort of snuggling with each other, just resting. And they have vultures, they have bats, they have snakes, they have deer, they have all sorts of animals, and the kids really like going there. It's also, interestingly, a separate admission. You can just go to Zoo America if you want. They have a separate parking lot outside the park just for the zoo. It's also included with your admission to Hersheypark. And here it is. You can see that massive elk there. That is the entrance to Zoo America across that little bridge. And there are lots of bridges in this park. And there's a nice view of the Triple Towers. Nearly every ride at the park has some tie-in to a Hershey product. That is their theming, after all. And next door to the park, which is a free admission, is Chocolate World, which has a free ride about it's like a dark ride about the making of chocolate, how Hershey goes about it. And it has the largest Hershey chocolate store in the world. It is absolutely massive, and you can get all sorts of treats there. If you like your chocolate, they have cases of chocolate you can buy there. So we're now heading down into the Pioneer Frontier section of the park, and there are quite a few rides down here, including Trailblazer, which was an early aero mine train. It's very short, but it's fun. It's another good starter coaster for kids. And you can see coming up here on the right, there's a lot of signage in the park to help you figure out where you are and where you want to go. And it's very clear, and it's very helpful because, as you can see, there are lots of little winding paths everywhere, and it can be difficult to see where you're going. And right there you just saw the Aqua Theater, which has a really popular sea lion show. In front of us you can see the Trailblazer. And there are a few eateries tucked away back there, and another one over here. And as you might expect, in the Pioneer Frontier, they have a lot of barbecue. We're going to hike up this pretty long hill here, which will take us into the upper section of the Pioneer Frontier area. The red track that you see up in front of us there on the hill, and which stretches off to the right, is the launch of Storm Runner, which is a really intense Intamin launched coaster. It has a magnetic launch and blasts you off along that straight section into some really tight inversions, and it stretches over a good area of the park. and not one of my particular favorites in the park. It's just a little too intense for me, but for younger and hardier people, it's a fun ride. The green coaster in the front is actually one of the older rides in the park, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but let's pause here to take a look at just how fast Storm Runner launches. And away they go. So, this green coaster is just a standard Vekoma boomerang that so many parks have. And what they did is they rethemed it to Jolly Rancher Remix, and they added a tunnel with lighting effects in it. So, it's a way to sort of give new life to an old tired ride. Now up here, there is Chicken Pete's, and that's on the left, and then there are more food concessions over on the right and a nice little shaded area to sit in and eat with little cafe tables. And this is going to move us to the next area of the park. Now over here on the right is a new ride. This is becoming a very popular ride at amusement parks. It is absolutely fascinating to watch when it runs. Personally, I would never ride it. It's generically known as a Nebula Z, but here at Hershey they simply call it Mixed. Now notice there's a food truck there right next to a food concession, and this is becoming such a common sight at amusement parks. They'll hire in food trucks all over the Midway because they simply can't get help in many of their food booths. So it's a way to ensure that guests have a variety of food. So we're going to cross this bridge here, and you notice there's rail track down there. And I'm going to see if I can get a good view, but this is the Dry Gulch Railroad, and it's dead in the water. The engine croaked, and so they had mechanics working on that. But for the 2 days we were there, the Dry Gulch Railroad never ran, which is a shame because it's one of my favorite rides in the park. And there you can see another coaster coming into the station, and we'll look at that in a little more detail. That's Fahrenheit, which is even more intense than Storm Runner. Now from here, there are a couple of ways to travel to the next section of the park. There are actually two different sections down this way. And what I want to do, because I don't think I ever did it before in a walkthrough, is I want to take you through the boardwalk section, which is Hershey's water park area. It's pretty extensive and very popular. So what we're going to do is take a right up a little bit further ahead and then circle around, and we'll come back to this area in a little bit. And here's the entrance to the boardwalk. It's really beautifully designed, very whimsical, and you'll see this sort of look carried through to all of the things that are out in this area, all the different water rides. That huge green shoot-the-chutes that you see in front of us is Tidal Force, which puts out a massive splash that we'll see a little later. Hershey began building up the boardwalk area around 2007, and they've continued to expand it and add more and more water rides over the years. The last being around 2018 is when they added the last big slides in there. But as you can see, it's a real good destination, and I'm very happy with that because the more people that are in the water park means the fewer people that are riding the coasters. So leaves a little more open space for me. Coming up on the right is a staircase that takes you up to the wave pool. They have a very large one, and we're not going to go that way. We're just going to swing around to the left here to move on to a different section of the park. We're going under tidal force right now. The area where we're heading is called Midway America, and it's a little bit of a nebulous transition because you have this enormous water play area in front of us, and that's technically still part of the boardwalk, but then you have this Lightning Racer, which was a revelation when it was built. It was Great Coasters International, with their swooping Prior and Church style design, made an incredible sort of racing dueling coaster. So the coasters cross each other as opposed to just simply following along beside each other for the whole way. And it's a wonderful ride. You have thunder or you have lightning, and interestingly, thunder usually wins. Lightning is usually a little bit behind. But either way, it's a fun ride with very different layouts. They don't follow the same pattern at all. So there's the water play area. In front of us, you can see the Wild Mouse, which is basically just a stock wild mouse. And we're going to head along this path into Midway America. So if you were to go straight alongside on the right of the big water play area, that would take you to the entrance of Lightning Racer. This we're going to bypass that because I've walked through that before in other walkthroughs. We're going to go up this section and take you to this thing that you see in front of us. It used to be the Wildcat, which was one of the first major Great Coasters International wooden coasters built. It was becoming pretty rough, and the park didn't really know what to do with it. So they got good old Rocky Mountain Construction to come in and reimagine the entire ride, and now it is called Wildcat's Revenge. And you can see by that drop, it's not your typical wood coaster. It's now a steel coaster with some wooden structure, and it's a typical RMC like Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, with all these incredible twists and turns and corkscrews. And for the entire 2 days we were there, it's a brand new ride that opened in 2023, and for the entire 2 days we were there, it never opened. They were having technical issues with it. So, there you have it. I never got to experience it, so I don't know what the ride experience is like. All I can say is it was probably like Steel Vengeance, a very similar ride. So we'll continue along this path. The colorful building on the left in front of us there is Laugh Track, which is essentially a spinning coaster in the dark, but I really like it. I'm not really a fan of spinning coasters, but this one I really like because of how colorful it is. It's designed to look like an old style fun house from the 1920s. So a lot of very silly cartoon characters, but all lit in neon like you would see in an old fun house. It's really colorful and fun. On the right there was the entrance to the Wild Mouse, and then following this path down, it will take us to Lightning Racer. There are innumerable winding paths throughout this whole section. We're going to take a right up here, and you'll see the big Ferris wheel in front of us. And as I mentioned earlier, we were at the park for 2 days, and it really is a 2-day park. It's very large, and it's usually very crowded, so it would be difficult to try to get everything in 1 day without really burning yourself out. So take it easy, spend 2 days. Hershey has a campground next to it and a shuttle that takes you to the park. The campground's very nice. Stayed there a few times. And there are also plenty of hotels in the area as well. We actually, when we were there, we stayed at a place called the Fulton Steamboat Inn in Ronks, which is right next door to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it's just down the street from Dutch Wonderland, which is another wonderful park that I've done a walkthrough of. More of a children's park, but a really fun place to stay. So if you stay at Fulton Steamboat Inn, you'd be near Hersheypark. It's only about a half hour away, and you'd be right down the street from Dutch Wonderland. And so that's one option. So there you saw the entrance to Lightning Racer, and now we're heading back up. And there's laugh tracks in front of us again. I'm normally not a big fan of coasters inside buildings because very often the building is just this massive Butler building that's ugly and takes away from the beauty of the park. At least here, Hershey tried to spruce it up and make it look like some sort of more interesting building than just steel walls. And there you can see the lift hill for Wildcat's Revenge in front of us. And we'll mosey on this. Notice there are lots and lots of benches all throughout the park, and that really helps, especially when you start getting older and hiking up these hills gets a little more intense. I haven't talked a lot about the food offerings at Hershey's, except to mention they do have veggie burgers. But they do have a real wide selection of food, a really nice variety for all tastes. In the building we saw at the very beginning, the Hershey Supply Company, there's a sort of cafeteria-style restaurant that serves interesting veggie wraps. And they say they're roasted vegetable veggie wraps, so I expected them to be hot, but they were actually cold, but they were still very good. So there's that if you want something vegan. And if you just want your barbecued meat, they've got plenty of that. If you want Middle Eastern food, they've got some of that. If you just want treats like ice cream, popcorn, they've got that. They've got fresh squeezed lemonade. They've got milkshakes. So a really, really big variety. And of course, being Hershey, they've got lots and lots and lots of chocolate things. If you go into Chocolate World and ride the chocolate ride there, the history of the making of chocolate, when you come out, they actually give you a little mini chocolate bar. So there's actually free food at Hershey's too, as small as it is. So just there you saw a little bit of Wildcat's Revenge. And now we're moving on, and in front of us is the structure of Tidal Force. And there's a Chicky and Pete's with crab fries. The park also does feature a lot of catering opportunities, so if you have a large group of people, they have lots of picnic pavilions that are off to the side that you can avail yourself of. So, again, like a normal amusement park, a big amusement park, they have a lot of options. So coming up here is Tidal Force, and let's see if we can catch one of the splashes. Yeah, that's a big splash. So now we're heading up toward a sort of nebulous region that's between Pioneer Frontier and Founder's Way. I'm not sure how they delineate what's where, because this really seems more like Midway America Founder's Way type of stuff, but they call it Pioneer Frontier. So we'll just call it Pioneer Frontier because that's what the park does. And notice they put these drying stations around next to Tidal Force, which is a good idea, and I saw a lot of people using them while we were there. So let's continue up this way. There's the entrance to the boardwalk over on the left, which we looked at earlier. And coming up on the right will be Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit is a really intense coaster, sort of like Cedar Point's Maverick. It has a vertical lift, and it has very short trains, and it has lots and lots of twisting turns, like you can see there. It's a lot packed into a very compact area. And off to the left there in the distance, you can see the track of the Jolly Rancher Remix coaster that we saw earlier, and that sort of helps ground you. With all the trees in the park, it can be really easy to get lost because you can't figure out where you are in the park. There are no landmarks to really say, oh, I'm here, unless you're near a big ride like Fahrenheit. Then you can say, okay, I'm in the sort of Pioneer Frontier Founders Way area. So on the right was the station for Fahrenheit, and the entrance is just around the corner there. And then up here on the right is one of the landmarks in the park. It's been here as long as I can remember, the Play Dome. It's this giant sort of fabric dome that houses a big arcade. Now notice the sign coming up here on the left for photos. And it's a really interesting era that parks have entered into because, of course, one of the standard features of any park, when you enter the park and walk in, you have people trying to take your photograph with these big cameras. And they want you to buy your photo before you leave. But people generally don't do that anymore because they all have phones, and the phones can take really good pictures, often better than the quality that the park gives you. And it's the same on the rides. When you ride a coaster and they take your picture on a coaster or a flume, you think, well, great, I've got my photo, but I could have taken a photo of myself if they let me take the camera out on the ride. And many parks now are forcing you to do a package deal, so they won't let you just buy a digital image of the photo for like $8 or $5, which doesn't really cost them much because they've already taken the photo digitally. They could just sell you and give you a download for the photo if you wanted it. And I would do that every single time on nearly every ride because I think it's a really neat feature. But they don't let you do that. You have to buy like a package deal now for $40 and get pictures on every single ride. So I wish parks would change that. I wish they would go back to just letting me buy a photo digitally for less money, and that would make me buy more photos. This is my little rant there. Up here is a Chick-fil-A. You know, it's Chicky and Pete's. Chick-fil-A. Chicken everywhere. Big Claw, of course, is the game. And then you can see this track in front of us. That is the monorail. And I love the monorail. It actually used to stop outside the park near the chocolate factory. So you could get on at the chocolate factory in the middle of Hershey and take it to the park. Or you could get off the monorail at Chocolate Town, or not Chocolate Town, but the Chocolate Factory. But they don't do that anymore. They cut that out. So it's just a continuous circuit loop around the whole park. It is a long ride, and it's very picturesque, and it's very relaxing. Over here is the Music Box Theater, which wasn't really doing anything when we were there. There was still a lot of entertainment theaters that aren't really functioning in the park. And I don't know if it's still a leftover because of COVID, the fear of getting people together, or it could be they just simply have trouble getting enough people as performers, but didn't see a lot of that. That was the monorail entrance there on the right. And now we are entering the Founders Way area. And there are lots and lots of kiddie rides in this area, and that's about as close to a kiddie land as the park gets, though they don't call it kiddie land. The coaster that you just saw going through that loop, that's Great Bear. So you know down in that way is the Hollow. Over here is the Reese's Cup Fusion ride. It's a dark ride with shooting guns, and it takes you through a sort of candy-themed dark ride. Very popular. We didn't go on it because the wait was about 2 hours to get in there, so we passed on that. There's the entrance to Skyview, the park's sky ride, And over there is where you can get fresh lemonade. And now we're entering a more quaint area, which the buildings look much more like the old Hershey, because it is really one of the oldest sections of the park. You have a Subway over there. On the right is the 1906 grill, where you can get veggie burgers and all sorts of food. And you can see that carousel pavilion over there. That's where the carousel originally was. It's now just basically a big open eatery place. So they have picnic tables in there, and you can sit and eat your food. And I think it's nice that they left the carousel pavilion intact. They might take it out later because they might find more use for it. And again, like almost all parks, big parks that I've been to, they had a group of brass players walking around the park playing music. You can see a tilt-a-whirl in the distance. The yellow track that you see is the first drop of Sky Rush, and you'll see the Comet over there in a minute. If you were to take a path between the Sky Ride and the lemonade stand, that would take you down to the station of the Comet in the hollow area. And around the corner here, coming up in front of us, is the big fountain of Milton Hershey. It reminds me a lot of the statue of Walt Disney that all the Disney parks have. If you like your New York hot dogs, we have a Nathan's here over on the right. In front of us is that building that I said used to have falafels. It used to be a Skyride station. And that brings us back to the park's entrance in Chocolate Town. And the place where we started our tour, where we went down that little alleyway toward Skyrush, that's over on the left. There goes the Comet. So if you are in the central Pennsylvania area and you've never been to Hershey Park, this is a must stop. It has a lot of great things for the whole family to do, from little kids to grandparents. There's plenty to keep you entertained for a day or two even. And there's also lots of other stuff in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. There's lots to do around here. It's Amish country, which is very beautiful. And Dutch Wonderland, in fact, has some Amish exhibits in it, in case you're unfamiliar with them. The whole new entrance I really like. I was a little upset at first when they were redesigning it because I love the old traditional look of the Tudor buildings that they had, but it really didn't say Hershey. It didn't say chocolate. It basically said Busch Gardens. So the new redesign definitely hits you over the head with the fact that this is Chocolate City. You can't really avoid that. So if you are in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, this is definitely a must stop. There's plenty to do for every age. Lots of thrill rides like Candemonium. There's tons of food, from really fancy delicacies to typical park food. And there aren't only rides just for little kids and for older people. You also, of course, have Zoo America. You have the aquatic show. So plenty to keep you entertained for 2 days. So if you are in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area, you owe it to yourself to make a stop at Hershey Park.